This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Authority Supreme Herbicide from FMC. Stop weeds before they start with Authority Supreme Herbicide. This dual-action pre-emergent solution delivers extended control of tough grassy and broadleaf weeds in field peas, chickpeas, and soybeans. Apply pre-seed or up to 3 days after seeding. See your retailer or visit ag.fmc.com today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for this Agronomic Monday, Lyndsey Smith. But don't worry, we're going to tackle the tariff talk. How could we not? But before we get to all that, I did want to send out a huge thanks and shout out to FP Genetics. They are the sponsors of today's show. So yes, you will hear from Chad Yanchycki. We're going to talk about the upcoming lineup for 2025. We'll tackle some durum, wheat, barley, peas and oats, in fact. So stick around for that in the third segment. But of course, before we get to that, although it is Agronomic Monday, we cannot have today's show here, February 3rd, without talking about the tariffs that are set as of recording, set to be put in place as of tomorrow, Tuesday, February 4th. Over the weekend, you'd have to, of course, been hiding under a rock not to have heard that U.S. President Donald Trump plans to institute these tariffs as of tomorrow, 10% on oil, 25% on everything else. We, of course, here at Real Agriculture, plenty of content at RealAgriculture.com. Please go check it out. Kelvin's been doing a phenomenal job trying to keep track of what the producer groups are saying, what the fertilizer industry is saying, both north and south of the border, how the cattle industry is trying to grapple with this. There are more questions than answers at this point, but we are doing our best to try and stay on top of what you need to know. On that note, if you are directly impacted or think you may be, we are getting plenty of questions and comments and sharing from our audience, and we appreciate it so very much because, of course, for many of us, we're trying to figure out what this actually means on the ground. So if you would like to be in touch, 1-855-776-6147, or you can email me, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or of course your regular host, Shaun Haney at shaney@realagriculture.com. We are trying to put together as many pieces as we can, and of course ask those questions of the industry groups, of the producer groups, of the government when we have a chance. So if you've got questions, send them our way. We'll do our best to try and answer them. I did want to also note, before we get rolling on today's show, I am headed later today to San Antonio, Texas to take in CattleCon. And so if you are there, find me. Would love to grab a selfie, say hello. But I'm going to be covering, of course, all of this tariff talk from the cattle angle when I land there in San Antonio this week. All right. Again, shout out FP Genetics. Thank you so much for sponsoring the show. It's going to be a good one. We will also have Wheat Pete on. So Peter Wheat Pete Johnson, he'll be on at the end of the show to actually tackle the Agronomic Monday part of Agronomic Monday. And he will be your agronomist host tonight. So as I mentioned, I will be en route to San Antonio. And so Peter Johnson is going to be joined by Dennis Pennington and Gord Specksnyder. They're going to be on the agronomist tonight to talk about the Yield Enhancement Network for Wheat, the Great Lakes Yen, and what they have found over several years, of course, of hosting this, but really tackling the 2024 season, seeing what we can learn from that and how we can apply that to 2025. All right, let's take a quick break. I'm going to be back with Shaun Haney and Kelvin Heppner to unpack what we know and don't know on this tariff situation after this.
We're in St. John's, Newfoundland at the Newfoundland Federation of Agriculture meeting, Ag Industry Symposium 2025. We've got Shelley Woodworth with Cavendish Agri-Services, Dr. David Burton at Dalhousie. Shelley, we'll start with you. What's one piece of advice for improving nitrogen management?
Split applying. I think the days of putting all your nitrogen on up front, those days are gone with the new products that we have, with the weather events that we have. And I also think we need to advocate for ourselves a little bit better. Everyone here is doing a really good job, but the the consumers and like the people buying our food don't always know our story and how good you guys really are doing. So think we need to find a better way to advocate a little bit better for ourselves.
David?
Only use what you need and use it in a way that it's most effective. So more is no longer better necessarily. Some cases it is, but some cases it isn't. Use what you need and use the kind of new tools like split application, enhanced efficiency products that will ensure that nitrogen is used most efficiently and gets the job done.
At Väderstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Väderstad, we look forward to growing together.
All right, welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this show, of course, brought to you by FP Genetics. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of seed and to contact your local territory manager. Gain a genetic advantage and experience the next wave with FP Genetics. All right, as promised, we could not have today's show without talking about tariffs. And so I've got your regular host, Shaun Haney, and Kelvin Heppner, both of Real Agriculture, joining me here. Welcome, gents. How are you now?
Whoa, fabulous.
Fabulous. Shaun's a liar, is what he is. Okay, no, just kidding. Shaun loves this stuff. So does Kelvin Heppner. So here we are. We're recording Monday morning, I want to say, because of course, who knows what will transpire today, but we'll catch you up to now. Kelvin, catch us up on what happened over the weekend.
First of all, I'd say I love following news. I'm not sure that this news story is one that I can just personally, it has not been a joy to cover this one, certainly. But yeah, a lot happened over the weekend. We could talk about this for a long time, but in brief, President Trump on Saturday afternoon signed 3 executive orders applying tariffs as of tomorrow, February 4th, to Canada, 25% across the board, except for energy products get a carve-out at 10%. Mexico gets a 25% tariff, and China gets a 10% tariff. And so now we've seen all kinds of reaction and discussion about what that means. In the meantime, late Saturday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced that Canada will be retaliating with tariffs on $155 billion worth of U.S. imports, with the first $30 billion tranche affected as of February 4th as well. The 125, the bigger round, is expected to be announced here in the coming days, with that taking effect in about 3 weeks' time. They are looking to give Canadian businesses some time to find different suppliers and that kind of thing. There will be some consultations on what's on that list as well. So the immediate response from Canada is this $30 billion tariffs on $30 billion worth of imports. That list came out yesterday as well. So we have a story on RealAg breaking down some of what's on that list. But we know that the President and Prime Minister spoke this morning, and that they are speaking again sometime this afternoon. And so there is still some hope out there that this all gets canceled or at least delayed, that there's an off-ramp, but it's not clear what that is at this point.
So, Shaun, ever the optimist, do you think the Trudeau-Trump discussion today will mean that your soothsaying last week of this doesn't actually get implemented actually happens?
Well, at this point, I don't think any of us know. My reaction to them talking this morning, as was promised, and them talking again today at 3 p.m. Eastern, I view that as a positive. I think one of the things that's been lacking clarity here is what's the actual ask? We know this is, fentanyl is a concern. It's a concern for Canada. It's a concern for the United States. The numbers speak to the fact that it's not to the level of concern from Canada's perspective with the U.S. that it is with the U.S. and Mexico from an illegal crossing standpoint on migrants or on fentanyl. So that's not really the ask. So it gets some attention, but what do you really want? I would hope that's what was discussed this morning. Clear, here's what I need. Here's what I want. Canada now has till 3 p.m. probably to answer the ultimatum that has been presented. We're getting a little bit closer to talking turkey, I would guess. I view it as a positive. Now, there's a bunch of things that can happen here. We could see President Trump say, hey, you retaliated. I told you not to. I'm going to increase the tariff. That's a possibility.
There's that clause in the executive order.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a possibility. And I agree with Canada calling the bluff, by the way. I think you got to press your chips in here in very short order. Another scenario is Canada and Mexico agree to renegotiate the USMCA earlier than was originally agreed to. That could back off the tariffs from being implemented, or maybe a reduced tariff. And there's probably those are kind of the two main ones. There's probably 3, 4, and 5 of other deals, but
yeah.
I think we're up to 10 different things that different U.S. Trump administration officials have said that they want from Canada, and that's why this is impossible to negotiate right now. How does Canada reach a conclusion or provide a solution to President Trump, give him a win, without having something clearly defined as the ask, which, like you said, Shaun, it would be really nice from Canada's perspective, if there was something clear put on the table this morning.
I thought it was interesting. The U.S. Dairy Export Council sent out a release yesterday, and I thought it was interesting that, dairy, one of the big things that Canada and the U.S. have traditionally fought about, there was showing concern and support for needing to control illegal migration and fentanyl. But there wasn't a lot of talk about how we need to pin this to the Canadians and get more dairy access. There was more of a let's hope cooler heads can prevail and this can be worked out. I thought that was an interesting kind of tell here a little bit from the U.S. dairy industry.
Kelvin, we've also heard, I was going to say we've also heard from the canola industry, but we're hearing a lot from the fertilizer industry as well. I'm not sure if that's where you were going with this, but there's some significant concerns.
Yeah. Canadian farm groups have almost all of them have come out with news releases or statements here in the last 2 days condemning these tariffs and highlighting the devastation that they could cause. But on the American side of the border, Shaun mentioned the U.S. Dairy Export Federation. We also saw American Farm Bureau, Zippy Duval, raise alarm about the impact of these tariffs. And the Fertilizer Institute, which represents the U.S. fertilizer industry stakeholders, supply chain, is also calling for an exemption for potash and nitrogen fertilizer products from Canada. Of course, potash, what is it, Shaun? 88% of the potash?
86, yeah.
Or 87?
Yeah, whatever.
I think the U.S. imports 95%.
Yeah.
95% of potash used in the U.S. annually is imported, and over 90% of that comes from Canada. And so that's something where they're calling, fertilizer industry certainly is calling on the Trump administration to exempt that. And I think from Canada's perspective, that's potentially a leverage point where there could be restrictions or an export tax applied if there's an exemption there where that it certainly wouldn't make stakeholders in Saskatchewan, where that potash is mined, happy, and the companies that own those mines happy. But if there's maybe some compensation put on the table, that might alleviate some of those concerns. And I think that restricting potash exports to the U.S. would have less domestic backlash here in Canada than restricting oil or energy exports. And at the same time, it would inflict more pain on influential customers, let's face it, in the U.S. Midwest as with spring around the corner.
We've also got definitely concern on the livestock side. Hogs going down to the States. So weanlings heading down to the States is a huge part of the hog sector. Cattle as well. I'm headed to CattleCon, as I said. Shaun's jealous. I'm not sure that if we could switch, I think we would. Shaun, what are you hearing? How do we navigate this on the cattle side?
Well, I think
the threat of this.
Yeah, I was posting on X on the weekend about this. I think if you're in a procurement department in the U.S., whether you're a farm or you're a large corporation, a processor or a packer, there's so much political risk here because if there's a narrative, and I think it's a believable one, that read Art of the Deal. This is asking for everything, including Canada becoming the 51st state, and get what you actually want as the ask is pulled back through the negotiation. If that's the case, and all of a sudden, President Trump changes his mind, hey, there's no tariffs this week, how are you going to feel if you had transacted on Tuesday when the tariffs are removed on a Thursday? You just increased your cost of goods on that inventory by 25%. And so this is the challenge that a lot of people are going through here, where I think, even if there is somewhat of a delay this week, I'm not sure how much business actually gets done. I'm being very patient because I am concerned because of the height of the political risk here that things are going to be flipped. Now, having said that, there is a lot of discussion happening, especially in the livestock sector, about who actually owes the tariff, who is going to pay it. And that's going to be I've talked to several people in the feed yard industry. We're having discussions with U.S. packers about that. Is it on the responsibility of the producer? Is it the packer that needs to pay it? And probably depending on how important of a customer you are, that's going to sort of derive some of that. I'm sure the same thing's happening on the hog side.
Well, and that's just it, is that leverage comes into play here. Because obviously, in the truest form, it should be the person bringing something into the U.S. Sure, but that's not reality. So, Kelvin, this brings to me, and one of the reasons that tariffs are just so disruptive to any sort of economic discussion is things like this. Like this, to me, the uncertainty and the volatility of them being on, off, etc., that in and of itself will have an incredibly negative impact and already is.
Yeah, exactly. And like Shaun alluded to, in some of these cases right now, buyers are just saying, no, we're not buying anything right now. We got to wait for the dust to settle here. And as the longer this uncertainty drags out and the longer the chaos reigns, the more that those relationships and transactions get severed, the more the supply chain backs up, and you end up with weanlings in hog barns here in Manitoba that don't have anywhere to go. That type of scenario is certainly on the table here this week as we speak. Companies are making plans if that scenario unfolds.
There's also, certainly we have heard on, exactly that, Shaun. Who pays the tariff? When does it get paid? Who adjusts their prices? There's a lot of negotiating going around in these individual, actual agreements. What sort of impact could that have on things like a cattle industry that needs to be processing cattle every week?
Yeah, you can only back off feed for so long, and if you haven't been paying attention, these animals are worth a lot of money.
Yep.
If let's just say, for example, an Alberta cattle feeder was responsible to pay 100% of the tariff, we're talking about $1,000 an animal, people. Like we are not talking about short, small change here.
Yeah.
When we think about integrated supply chains, and you're going to hear a lot about this week at CattleCon, Lyndsey. The cattle industry is a great example. It's similar to kind of the auto industry where inventory is moving back and forth in a very efficient manner to try to deliver to the consumer and feed that demand that is out there, whether it's domestically in Canada, the U.S., or that is internationally. Those supply chains are set up for a reason the way that they are, especially post 1990 and the early 90s and NAFTA. So, this kind of 25% tariff to this level is significant, whether that's corn coming into Canada, that is feeder cattle coming into Canada, that is fat cattle leaving, backgrounders leaving, box beef leaving. And that's the other thing we're not following here. What happens to box beef trade? Okay. If I'm a packer sitting in Canada, I am not just going to willy-nilly be trying to move product to the U.S. It's going to have an impact relatively soon on what beef prices are at the grocery store level in the U.S. And what we saw last week about the talk about all the egg prices going up to the significance that they have, just imagine how people are going to be outraged about beef.
Mm-hmm. Kelvin? Go ahead.
Sorry, can I just jump in? That brings up Canada's retaliatory list, and what's on that initial list that was announced yesterday. Live cattle is not on there. Beef is not on there. Pork is not on there. But Finance Canada has said that beef and pork products will be on the 3 weeks from now kind of list, the $125 billion list. So we can expect retaliatory tariffs on American beef and pork products coming this way if things if we don't reach a solution before that. Should also note that corn you mentioned coming into Canada from the U.S., not on the list either, but canola is, and that is an issue for a crush plant. For example, Bunge has a crush plant just near where I live here in southern Manitoba that gets a large portion of its incoming canola seed from North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota farmers. That canola seed is going to potentially will face a tariff starting tomorrow coming into Canada. And so there you have American farmers being affected by that. At the same time, Bunge and other canola crushers across Canada are going to have to deal with a tariff on oil and meal going into the U.S. And so that's where things could quickly come to a head here in the processing value add sector of agriculture in the coming days, unless, again, we see some sort of resolution.
Yeah, and if you believe that somebody like Senator Grassley has influence, who this morning was posting on X about, needing exemptions on fertilizer for American farmers, where I would be going if I'm the Canadian government, I'm going to ethanol. If you look at U.S. ethanol exports that are very important to the U.S. farmer, 30% of those exports go to Canada. It's over $1 billion a year. 60% of our ethanol imports are coming from the U.S. This is big business, and we don't think of it as an ag commodity. It is an ag commodity in the Corn Belt. So I would be trying to tap into that in 21 days, that $122 billion additional list. If I'm the Canadian government, I'm putting ethanol on that list.
All right, let's leave it there. We're out of time. Thank you both. Everyone, head on over to realagriculture.com. We've got tons of coverage there, and we'll continue to over the course of this week as this all plays out. And come on back to the Friday Issues panel. We'll be, I don't know. It seems a very long way away and also not. So we'll see.
I don't know where we're going to be on Friday.
I have no idea. Okay, Kelvin, Shaun, thank you so much. And of course, thank you to FP Genetics for sponsoring today's show. We'll take a break, and I'll be back with more right after this. If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated, but did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agrimart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
Through a growing storm of kochia, cleavers, chickweed, and more, there's a clear path. Introducing Oxbow, a versatile cereal broadleaf herbicide that gets the job done. Powered by Duplisan technology, Oxbow is your workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds. With flexibility in timing, rates, and recropping options, your path is clear. Find your way on the path of least resistance at newfarm.ca/Oxbow.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio. This show is brought to you by FP Genetics, and that means it's time for our product spotlight with FP Genetics. Joining me now, it's Chad Yanchycki. He's the sales manager for FP Genetics. Chad, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me today.
Chad, as sales manager, what does that mean for what you do in a day, what you do in a week? What keeps you busy?
Yeah, so I work closely with our 3 territory managers. We got one in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. Work closely with them on the production side of things, and then I do a lot of work on the end user side. So, opening up some doors for markets for these varieties that we bring. Things like mill runs that we got to get done for oats to get accepted through some of the major millers, stuff like that.
So working up the value chain there. I like it. Okay. Which brings us to, of course, the reason we're talking today, let's get into it. Let's get into the 2025 lineup. What's got you really jazzed up about varieties for this year?
Yeah, so I'll start with barley. One of our big varieties is AAC Synergy. So a tried and true variety that people are well aware of. Great for malt, great malt acceptance. Kind of that number 1 malt acre right now. So a really nice yield package to it. Decent standability to it. Looks really, really good. And I think what you're going to see with it is it's going to continue to be that number 1 malt acre variety on the market for the next, 4 or 5 years. So exciting things there for us. When I look into durum, for example, we've got the first ever I-rated durum that hit the market. So it's an intermediate rating for Fusarium. And that one's super exciting because it's the first one that's ever been an I-rated durum in the world for that. So that's pretty big news. It stands nice, really nice yield package to it. Kind of opens up some of those fringe acres as well. So you get some of those areas that kind of come in and out of durum depending on how your year is. So it kind of brings those acres back into play. So we've seen it commercially. We launched in the marketplace last year. Uptake on it was phenomenal, and feedback on it's really, really good. So We expect to see that again this year. The uptake's been fast and good this year as well. When we move into the rest of our wheat portfolio, some really strong varieties in the hard reds. So first being AAC Hodge. So this is a midge-tolerant variety. Good fit in the parkland and those areas that really rely on that midge tolerance. It's got good standability on it, really good yield package on it, excellent disease package on it with nice protein. Farmers have really liked the yield that they're getting out of this variety. It is a little bit taller, so we've seen really good results using a PGR with a variety like this. However, you get your cattle guys that really like it because it provides a little bit of extra straw for them. So a really well-rounded variety. Another one is SY Manus. So this is a conventional hard red variety, very unique variety. So we see a lot of this in Manitoba. It's a really high yielding variety. It's got a little bit more of a shallow root structure. So you want to put it on areas that have maybe a little bit heavier soil, a little bit more moisture to it. As if you get into a sandy soil, for example, you can see it dry out a little bit quicker. But areas where it's got good moisture, a little heavy soil, it thrives, and you'll probably see it as being one of the top yielders on your farm. That's why it's exploding in acreage here in Manitoba this year. Really good uptake on it. I think we'll see it chew a lot into the market share realm of the wheats here in Manitoba. And if you look in Alberta, in that irrigation country, you'll see a lot of people interested in that variety as well. It's done really well into irrigation where they can put some water to it. It's short, stands extremely well. Like I said, puts it a really nice yield to it. Last on our wheats that I wanted to highlight was AAC Hockley. So this is a variety that fits really well across Western Canada. When you look at varieties that we bring to market, often what you see is there's weaknesses somewhere in a variety, right? It's no variety that's kind of perfect from front to back. And although I won't say Hockley's that, it's pretty darn close. It's a variety that stands extremely well. I'd put it as one of the best standers on the market today that's out there. Really nice yield to it. Excellent protein to it. Very strong disease package and strong fusarium levels rating on it. So it's a strong MR to fusarium. Just an overall really nice variety that threshes really nice. Farmers love it. We're seeing this one really take off here across Western Canada as well. And then the last variety I wanted to highlight quickly was in our oat portfolio. CDC Anson is launching this year in 2025. So this is the first variety that I've seen have this much hype in my entire time dealing with seed production and bringing varieties to market. A lot of excitement around grows with this. A lot of the oats that have hit the market in the last 10 years have been a little bit on the higher side for height, so a little bit taller. This one's shorter, brings that height down to something a lot of growers are happy about, but you're not sacrificing the yield. So a short oat, really high yield potential on it. It's got great beta-glucan levels on it, so the millers are really excited about it. We've almost got all full miller acceptance on it, so we just got a few little mill runs to get done here on the last few, but looking really positive. So if people want to chat about Anson or want to know where they can all sell it, just reach out to somebody at FP.
So that covers the cereals. What about pea acres? What have you got for pea acres for 2025?
Yeah, so we've got a couple here. Chrome would be a big one for us. So it's been kind of tried and true across Western Canada. High yielder, short pea, about 10-15 centimeters shorter than most varieties. But a new one we got launching here in 2025 is AAC Julius. And this one will shave off, kind of depending on where you are, 3 to 5 days on maturity on chrome, holding that chrome yield, smaller pea, 210 gram pea size with a really strong seed coat to it. So that one's going to hit the market here in 2025. Lots of hype and excitement around that one with seed coat, the yield, and a little bit earlier of a pea.
Okay, which of course brings us to, with this exciting lineup, with all there is to sort of decide on, where can farmers go for more information about these genetics, for agronomic support as well, of how to make that choice on which one of these is the best fit for their farm?
Yeah, so our website's probably the best spot, fpgenetics.ca. It's got all the territory managers' email, phone number information on there, as well as the rest of our company. You can reach out to anybody at FP. We're all pretty well versed on our portfolio and varieties. And when you look at our territory managers, for example, they each cover their entire province. So they get a vast knowledge on how these varieties perform from corner to corner, different soil types, different conditions, high moisture, low moisture, all that kind of stuff. Give them a shout, talk to them. They'll sit down with you, go over what's best for your farm. We all know every variety is not going to fit on every acre of every farm, and every farmer does things a little bit different management-wise on their farm. So sitting down, booking a meeting with us to really go over what your goals are for your farm will really help us pick that variety that's gonna suit your farm the best.
Fantastic. All right, Chad, thank you so much for joining me here on the show, brought to you by FP Genetics.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm. Calling all Montana, Dakotas, and northern Minnesota growers, are you looking for a profitable addition to your farm that can deliver value beyond yield? The new Seed Omega-3 Canola Production System can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities and an active God clause. Contracts include first-in-class agronomy support and free on-farm pickup after harvest. Contracts are available now. Commit early to maximize your opportunity. To learn more, visit omega3canola.com.
Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and today's show, of course, brought to you by FP Genetics. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of seed and to contact your local territory manager. Gain a genetic advantage and experience the next wave with FP Genetics. All right. The man who knows about genetics joins me now for Agronomic Monday. Peter Pete Johnson. How are you, Pete?
I'm awesome. Thanks, Lyndsey. It's a warmer day here in my part of Ontario than it was the last few. So that's welcome. Although, man, it looks like it's going to get cold again. It's just one of those winters for sure. And by the way, I don't know as much about genetics as a true breeder knows about genetics. Okay. Like I understand genetics and I like to evaluate genetics, but yeah, there's a lot to genetics. There's just no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Okay, so for Agronomic Monday, we've got a lot to cover. We will talk weather and how that relates to some of our agronomic questions. But I want to start with, and we've talked lots about tariffs today on the show with Kelvin and with Shaun. We're not going to talk about it in this segment per se, but Pete, you've got your Wheat Pete 15, which I love, which really starts to address that we need to connect and really talk about perhaps maybe what's going well, what's not going well. So what's your perspective on levels of stress right now and what farmers can be doing?
So Lyndsey, I really think that this tariff talk has just ramped the stress level up exponentially. And it's because of the uncertainty. We as a species, most of us do not like uncertainty. It's why when you go sit in a meeting room, wherever you sit in that first chair, you are going to sit in that chair all day. And in fact, if it's a 3-day conference, you might well sit in that chair for all 3 days because we just like stability. This uncertainty the stress level has gone through the roof. And there's nothing we can do about it. We don't know what the future will bring, but I really do think that it's incredibly important when these things happen to make those connections again, whether it's Wheat Pete's 15, whether it's getting out to your local soil and crop annual meeting or whatever function you go to the local coffee shop. Remember, at the local coffee shop, you never want to tell the first lie because it won't be a big enough lie, but
third or fourth. Yeah.
Or last. Last, you can always close it down, but you never know if it's the last one. Regardless, I think it's incredibly important to make those connections, to keep those connections, because at any point in our history when we have this uncertainty, stress level goes up. And we just don't need that. We just need to support each other 100%.
And we've got a crop to put in the ground in a couple of weeks. A lot of people are lambing. Calves will be coming. You know, there is, to me, I find just even personally, the being able to rely on sort of those seasons and the change of it adds a certain level of certainty, right? But you're right, as farmers, we deal with incredible levels of volatility and uncertainty, et cetera, and it can be very stressful. So I think good advice, Pete, maybe go out and do some curling in a fun spiel. Or, whatever. Pete's good at that. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit, though. I do want to think about, we are into February. I have no idea if the groundhog saw a shadow or not. I don't think it matters, Pete, because...
No, Lyndsey, it matters, 100%.
It does not.
If the groundhog sees his shadow, it's 42 more days of winter. And if he doesn't
is?
see his shadow, it's 6 weeks of winter.
Right. But we live in Canada.
Six times 7 is 42 days. So either way, we've got 42 more days of winter. So of course.
That's right. It doesn't matter. And we are going to talk about weather in a few different ways, but I did want to touch on first stripe rust. Definitely a concern. What are we thinking for the Canadian prairies for this year?
Yeah. So a really great article from the Prairie Crop Disease Network. And there's researchers in the state of Washington that really watch stripe rust. And so for the Canadian prairies, that's where the stripe rust inoculum comes from. And it comes from winter wheat in the Pacific Northwest. For Ontario, stripe rust tends to come from Kentucky or further south, maybe even from Texas, and blow up from that perspective. And last year we saw really early stripe rust in Ontario because the stripe rust overwintered further north. If it overwinters further north, it can ramp up more quickly and arrive earlier. And that's when it's devastating. The earlier you get it, the more devastating it is. Right now in the Pacific Northwest, the forecasts are for a very high disease pressure year. They have lots of stripe rust already showing in the Pacific Northwest. They are talking about 27 to 57% yield loss on highly susceptible varieties. Now, I have seen highly susceptible varieties untreated with 80% yield loss. It's like tar spot in corn, stripe rust. It's like crown rust in oats. Stripe rust in wheat is one of those diseases that is simply devastating. So all this is a heads up. It's not a alert yet. But what it is let's forget about tariffs. We are farmers. We need to grow the best crop. We need to raise the best beef or sheep or whatever. So it's time to start paying attention to those things that we do and we do well. And one of which is these forecast models, which are getting better and better. Mm-hmm. If you're a farmer in the prairies, I think you just have to realize that stripe rust is a higher potential this year than normal. Doesn't mean it will happen, but it certainly means you have to scout for it, pay attention to your genetics, whether or not you're growing a highly susceptible variety or a moderately resistant variety, and be prepared to spray an early fungicide if stripe rust hits early, because a fungicide can give you 98, 99% control and prevent that 50% yield loss. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things you need to tuck in the back of your brain and say, okay, make sure my agronomist is aware, or make sure I'm doing the scouting. However we're going to do this, we're going to stay on top of stripe rust in 2025.
Is stripe rust one of those ones that can spread quickly as far as once it's in a field?
They call it yellow death in Europe, Lyndsey.
Oh, so that will do it.
Yeah, they call it that because of the speed at which it spreads. In Ontario, many years ago, stripe rust hit. I was in a field on Friday. I could see the stripe rust, and I said to the grower, "We need to get this sprayed." And he said, "Well, I'm going away for the weekend. I'll come back Monday, and we'll try to get to it then." Got a call from him on Monday, went back to the field, and it had gone from some stripe rust to the entire field yellow. Like it didn't even look green anymore. In 3 days, it had just decimated that crop. Now, the inoculum was already there, and that's an extreme example, but yellow death, it moves incredibly fast.
Okay. So forewarned is whatever it is. Okay.
Forearmed.
So that's it. Forearmed. But I only have 2. Okay. No, so that's good. Okay. We have quite a list, but we do have one more segment, but we're getting close to our time on this one here. But before we hop to a break, when we come back, we'll talk more weather. I want to first touch on land prices, land rentals. I want to go there first.
Okay. So land prices, for the most part, have been staying pretty stable from a selling perspective. There's more land on the market. Everybody is pretty much in agreement with that, but it's almost as if the sellers are not yet ready to take less. And so maybe some marginal pullbacks, but pretty much still stable. Land rentals, on the other hand, just seem to keep going up. And I don't know, maybe there's stability in some areas, but the price people are willing to pay for land, and it sort of makes sense, Lyndsey, if you think about it. If I'm going to pay $25,000 for an interest, or pardon me, as a land purchase price, then that's $1,250 at 5% in interest alone on that acre. So it makes land rent look really cheap. But land rent at $600 an acre. So Kevin sent me a nice email saying that, that in his part of the world, there's a lot of land changing hands. And one of the new strategies, and I've heard this from other areas as well, is that we're going to do a share crop agreement. The landlord gets 50%, one half of the crop. And it always used to be, and paid for half the inputs. Not the equipment costs and that, but half. Just inputs. No, the new agreement is you get half the crop, and the person doing the farming pays 100% of the crop inputs. And you just go, how does that work? Because if I get 60 bushel soybeans at $14 a bushel, that's $840 an acre. And half of that's $420. So now I have to pay for all my inputs and make profit on $420 an acre. And I'm just going, that doesn't work. But then I thought about it this way, Lyndsey. The cash rent in that particular part of the world is, $500 an acre or more, up to $600 an acre. Maybe 50% crop share actually looks pretty good from that perspective. But regardless, it's how does this work? I don't understand. But hey, if they can make it work, power to them.
Okay. It is a bit of a head scratcher. And there's probably more we could explore as far as, the decisions that get made on that land, et cetera. Who's incentivized to do what? I think there's plenty of incentive in that way to obviously try and get peak yields. At the same time, it's not like crop prices are amazing right now, and input prices are also high. So anyway, would love feedback on that one, everybody. If you've got it, I think sharecropping is one of those things much more common in Ontario, and it's something probably when we talk about these things from like a Western perspective, we probably don't talk about enough, because it definitely exists way more out there in Ontario than anywhere else, that I know of anyway. Okay, we're going to take a quick break on today's Agronomic Monday, brought to you by FP Genetics, and I'll be back with Wheat Pete right after this.
I'm the kind of guy who enjoys his freedom. Sure, I have a wife, kids, and a mortgage. But now I have new on-deck herbicide for wheat and barley. Thanks to a unique combination of actives, it delivers both superior control of tough weeds like kochia and proactive resistance management with, listen to this, complete rotational freedom. You can't tie this wild stallion down. Spray for today, plan for tomorrow with new on-deck herbicide. Visit your retailer or Corteva.ca to learn more.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Agronomic Monday. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and this show is brought to you by FP Genetics. FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of seed and to contact your local territory manager. All right, Peter Johnson joining me for this Agronomic Monday, shadowed by tariffs. But we're not going to talk about that in this segment. We're going to talk about something totally stress-free, and that is weather. And so it is not stress-free. I apologize, everybody. But it does feel like, and I've even talked to my friends out west, it does feel like Canada, at least, is having a relatively average, maybe more typical winter, but that is not the case in other growing regions in North America. Why does that matter, Pete?
Well, I think it matters, just as we talked in the first segment, if the weather conditions are more conducive for stripe rust in that Pacific Northwest, it impacts the prairies further on. Right now in Iowa, I understand that they've had very, very little snow, that they're way behind in their snowfall accumulation. That has some impact in terms of moisture reserve in the subsoil for them. That can still be caught up. It's not a big deal at this point, and I don't think they're suffering, but it also has some level of impact on disease and insects. And we do get many different diseases and insect pests that do come up from down that part of the world. So if they're warmer or wetter and they get a higher pressure and we get that spore load. That's how we got tar spot originally, was a huge spore load that came out of the U.S. Midwest and it blew over Ontario. And now we are fighting tar spot on an annual basis in much of the province. So I do think weather other places makes a big difference on what we do here in Ontario, but also what happens in Ontario or in the prairies has a big impact in terms of what happens as well. So, we've actually had cold temperatures this year, which last year we didn't have at all. And so typically cold temperatures mean that we get less insect survival of some particular species. Now, you always got to be careful because snow is a blanket, and just because it's minus 22 air temperature doesn't mean that the soil is all that cold. You actually have to get the soil down to about minus 14 to have a real impact on a lot of the insects. And so some areas, along the north shore of Lake Erie, they had almost no snow, and they did have some of those really cold temperatures. So maybe something like Western bean cutworm might not survive as well. I would never want to say for sure, but it's just that weather does have that impact from that perspective. And then snow, it's been like Snowmageddon, right, Lyndsey, in some areas?
But only in some areas. This is what's crazy. I'm near Ottawa. We typically have a ton of snow. We have some. It's not a lot, but I have friends in Grey County. I'm not allowed to say Bruce County because they're not in Bruce County. It's totally different, you guys. They have had just mountains of snow, 18 snow days, like snow piles that are 6 feet high. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, like the pictures of Sauble Beach where all you can see of the stop sign. And by the way, Sauble Beach is in Bruce County, I'm pretty sure, not in Grey County. But regardless, they're both up there together. Like all you can see is the top of the pole. You can't even see the stop sign anymore. Yeah. Like it's unbelievable. And so what happens when we get that is right away, I start to get questions about snow mold in winter wheat and winter barley, which is 100% bang on in terms of what might happen. We had a huge growth last fall. A lot of the wheat got in decent time, and the early planted wheat, we actually saw sulfur and nitrogen deficiency. It got so big. Well, when you have big top growth, you become much more prone to snow mold. So snow mold is one of those things. The other one that kind of resonates in my brain because, man, everybody, they love this concept of broadcast winter wheat into standing soybeans in those short season areas of Grey and Bruce County. But can't have treated wheat seed in the soybeans you harvest, so we use untreated wheat seed. And in fact, I've had the question earlier on, is dwarf bunt even a thing anymore? I haven't heard about it for a number of years. Well, guess what? With the snow cover we have this year, it could well be a dwarf bunt year. And if you use treated seed, well-treated seed, you shouldn't have a problem. But if you use untreated seed, the dwarf bunt is in the soil, you get that 6 to 8 weeks of continuous snow cover, and you could have a dwarf bunt problem. And that is 100% bad. So big differences in the snow belt areas versus Ottawa versus Ingersoll where I'm living. Like we have some snow just like you, but not a lot. And you just go, wow, huge differences in the risks that presents.
Okay. We have a few minutes left, Pete. I did want to talk about sulfur management because this has been a big topic of conversation with Tech Talk Tuesdays, with the Word. What do we need to know on sulfur management when we have more average conditions like we're having?
Yeah. So last year we had no winter. right?
Yeah.
And we saw this massive response to early applied nitrogen, but also to early applied sulfur. And there's some work from Kurt Steinke out of Michigan State University that has even suggested fall applied sulfur might be a benefit. The challenge with a winter like this is if you fall applied that sulfur, there's a very good chance that when we get this snow melting, that all of that sulfur that the plant could get access to is going to get leached out of the root zone. Sulfur is different than nitrogen. It doesn't leach as easily as nitrogen, but all that has to happen is leach it out of the root zone. And now I'm sulfur deficient. But this early spring application, last year we were applying the first sulfur at the end of February, and the wheat had already greened up. The chances of that happening to the Ontario winter wheat crop in 2025 is pretty doggone slim. Mm-hmm. I never say never, but it's going to have to change tomorrow to make that happen. Yeah. So I think we're back to a little bit more normal situation. I still want to see that sulfur get on as early as we can, but don't put it on snow. So I really think we're going to back up those initial, like, let's get her done kind of concepts and put it into a more normal time frame where maybe it's the middle of March before we roll, or who knows, because we don't know what March weather is going to bring. But be ready with the sulfur, be ready with that first shot of nitrogen. But I don't think it is critical this year because the wheat is totally dormant. It's not taking up anything. And I think we're going to have a little more normal window to get that job done without losing some yield potential.
Now, before we talk about tonight's agronomist, because it's a pretty special one for a lot of reasons, is a good syrup season good for a crop season? Is that how it goes?
No, it's the other way.
Oh, okay. So forget the groundhog. I'm more curious about, so if we have a terrible syrup season, that's good for the crops. And vice versa.
It's good for winter wheat or winter rye,
which is the one we only care about. Okay,
yeah, or winter canola because it means less freeze thaw cycles, which causes frost heave.
Yeah,
I sort of like it when we get both.
Well,
right?
Yes, because we love syrup, unlike Shaun Haney. Yeah, exactly. Okay, but quickly, so as I mentioned earlier in the show, I'm headed to cover CattleCon down in Texas for a couple days, which means I will not be hosting the agronomist tonight, but I am gladly handing over the reins to you, Peter Johnson. What can everyone expect tonight on the agronomist? What's the topic?
So tonight is learnings from the YEN, the Yield Enhancement Network. We have Gord Speckschneider. He's a YEN participant from Central Ontario. Gord's just a really inquisitive, discerning individual that has not done well growing wheat and wants to do better. And with him, we have Dennis Pennington out of the Michigan State University. He's one of the lead people on the YEN program with Joanna Fallings from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness here in Ontario. And so we're just going to walk through Gord's report. And with YEN now, we have a dashboard that's coming where you can sort through all the data. So Gord's on sand. So we're going to sort on sand data, pull out the clay data, and say, what can Gord learn from this YEN program? And I am stoked. I won't be nearly as good a host as you, Lyndsey, but nonetheless, this is going to be an awesome session tonight.
It's a pretty low bar, Pete. I'll be honest. Okay, so you're going to do fine. If I can, I'll grab the last of the show live when I hit the ground, but I doubt it. So I'll watch the replay, which everybody head on over to YouTube. You can watch the replay or realagriculture.com/agronomists. So check that out at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, or check it out after the fact and you can watch Pete in action as host of The Agronomist. All right, Pete, thank you so much for joining me on the show here. And with that, we'll wrap up today's show. Thank you to FP Genetics for making this show possible. And I'll be back on Friday for the Issues panel. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast brought to you by Authority Supreme Herbicide from FMC. Give your crops the 2-in-1 protection they deserve. Authority Supreme's dual modes of action attack weeds early, delivering effective resistant management and prolonged control during critical growth periods. Dominate the toughest weeds before they take hold. Be your retailer or visit ag.fmc.com today.